on poisonous platitudes. These are cliches that I think usually have like a helpful intent, but can be rather hurtful. And today's platitude is God will never let you down. Now, I've received pushback on doing this one before in progressive circles. And I get that. I get that. I've seen a lot of apologists jump out on this one. This is a popular talking point for pastors across the spectrum. Who can we depend on? God. When everybody else fails, God won't let us down. And yet, is this always the reality that we experience? I have found that disappointment happens in every kind of relationship that we have if they go long enough and deep enough. You can have the best coworkers in the world, and inevitably, if you're at that job long enough, someone's going to let you down, right? You can have the best friend group, and if you're going to have friendships that span decades, you're going to have to navigate disappointment within them. This is one of the hardest parts, I think, of having adult friendships. One of the biggest pain points a lot of us carry with is our friends do let us down. And we could talk about these things rather easily when they come to our marriage relationships or our parental relationships, but we often don't know how to talk about them when they come to our adult friendships. Especially since who are we going to talk to about it? Our friends who have let us down? Parents will be disappointed at some point with their kids. And kids will inevitably be disappointed with their parents on something. Could be minor, could be major. And then here we have God. God who we speak about as divine parent. God who we speak about as friends in the book of John. God, I think, does disappoint us sometimes. It's just so many of us have been raised with this idea that we can't question this relationship we have with the divine, that we like to pretend we don't experience disappointment. Whenever we have expectations, I think we will come to a point where in our relationships where expectations may go unmet, or maybe not met the way we want them to be. And one of my hopes with this series is that we can go a bit deeper than the cliches we may trot out to other people or for ourselves. But that also means that we can get honest. Honest with ourselves. Honest with one another. Honest with God. Now, there is a book in the Hebrew Bible you may have heard of called Job. And I love the book of Job. It is an uncomfortable read. It is, at times, a cringy read. Yeah. Did I hear Carol? Carol, you're not sitting where you normally are, but I heard that. And it is an honest read. It goes on a bit too long. It is absolutely a downer. And it's so refreshing. At least to me. But for those of you who may not be familiar with it, or perhaps it's been a while, I want to introduce you to the story of Job. There once was a man named Job. He lived in the way back times, before there was Moses, before there was even a nation of Israel or Judah. And he was a good and righteous man. He did everything right. Everything. All of the stuff. He was such a righteous person that when God would hold divine council meetings, Again, this is your regular reminder that this is a feature in the Hebrew Bible. Occasionally, God would have council meetings with other divine beings. God would be like, hey, have you heard of Job? He's awesome. Job does not know that he is the topic of conversation, but God's proud of Job. And because Job is such a righteous, good person, Job has all of the earthly blessings you might assume a good person to get. Job has 10 adult children, which is wonderful. He's married to someone who stood faithfully by him this whole time. His kids get along so well that they will have each other over for feasts, which is remarkable. Can you imagine having 10 siblings, and when you're adults, you all hang out and party with each other? What world is this? And he has lots of land. He's growing lots of food on it, which means he has a very stable present day. He's extremely rich, and he has a stable future. Kids are not just like the light of your eyes, they're also your retirement plan in this world. And what you have, you pass on to them too. So Job's future is looking bright. And then, in a single day, he loses everything. Everything. His farms, his crops, his home, burnt to the grounds, pillaged, plundered, gone. He's now homeless. He has nothing he can pull from. There's no bank account he can draw from. Retirement plan. Well, that would be his kids. But wouldn't you know it, they've also just been murdered. Which is a pretty bad day, right? You lose everything and your kids are murdered? It's not a good day. He wakes up the next morning, and now he's covered in boils. Which is just like a great visceral term, isn't it? Yeah, it's so uncomfortable to think about. And it's supposed to be. This man is so ill now. He's disfigured from these boils. His wife turns to him and says, you really should give up on this whole thing. Just curse God and die. And to his credit, he says, no. I came from the womb naked, and I will go back into the earth naked. Okay, Job. Job has 3 friends, 3 good buddies. What a blessing it is to have friends when we're suffering, right? And these 3 friends, they come to their friend. They are shocked by how he looks. And they sit with him in dust and ashes for a week in complete silence. There's been so many times in my life when I've just needed people to sit with me in silence. Not rushing out any easy answer to try to alleviate my pain or come up with like a quick solution, just to share space with me. Just to be there. But a week is a long time to sit in silence with anybody, and eventually, Job speaks up. He speaks up and he says, I can't believe this has happened. I've lost everything. Everything, and I don't know why. This is just too much to bear. I wish I was dead. Better yet, I wish I was never born. This is in the Bible. Folks will want to rush out. Hey, you shouldn't think these thoughts. You're a bad person if you think these thoughts. And yet here it is. The ancients knew sometimes these are realities we have to contend with. But his friends do not like this talk. And this begins several rounds of debates. Not like one round of debate or two rounds of debate. It's the bulk of the book. Most of this book, 40 chapters, are like rounds of debates as Job and his friends go round and around and around about why he's in this predicament and how to get out of it. And his friends cannot tolerate these words coming out of their friend's mouth. And when they speak up, they say, hey, look, God is just. You must have done something wrong to be in this predicament. So why don't you just repent, confess that you messed up, and God will, like, maybe start restoring your fortunes to you. Job calls them all miserable comforters. Because what else would you call them, right? I love this phraseology, by the way. I think we need to trot this out more often. Because I find that it is often true that when we are suffering, people will rush out to us with their easy answers. They may be trying to comfort us, but it does the exact opposite of what they may be intending to do. They trot out their easy answers. Look, Job, you want to know why you're homeless? It's because you deserve it. You want to know why you're sick? You didn't worship God right. You want to know why your kids were murdered? Well, either you really screwed up or your kids really screwed up, because God is just and fair and everybody gets exactly what they deserve in this life. And remember, Job, you would tell people the exact same thing. How? Have you ever had your own easy answers thrown right back in your face? Job responds, look, if this is punishment for mistakes I've made, then God is an unfair judge. In fact, if this was a human who had problems with me, if this was an earthly ruler, I would at least, I hope, get the benefits, if they were a just ruler, to plead my case to them before they initiated a punishment for me. But I don't even get the privilege of doing that with God. I wish I could call God to the carpet right now and plead my case. God, this punishment doesn't fit whatever crime you think I may have committed. Over 30 chapters go on like this, with this brutal back and forth, which is too much. Too much for this modern reader, to be honest. About like 10 chapters in, I'm already like, hey, somebody help this guy out. You know, I'm already indignant on Job's behalf. Yeah, and you just want somebody to like just step in and be like, whoa, 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 knock it off, fellas. Just let this guy like grieve. Hey, maybe you should just get him some like chicken noodle soup at the very least, bandage his wounds. You know, maybe he could stay the night at one of your homes. And wouldn't you know it, eventually somebody does break into this conversation. There's a crowd that's now been generated around Job and his three friends as they argue with one another about why his life sucks right now. And it's a young guy who comes with this fresh perspective. He chastises Job's friend, and you're like, finally, somebody has given these guys a talking to. But he says, hey, listen, you guys are terrible at this. Let me argue Job into finally confessing why his life sucks and that it's all his fault. You're like, no! No! And when he's done talking, there is no rebuttal. It's just kind of like he finishes talking at Job and the rest of them, and they're like, anyway, as we were saying, Job. And then God intervenes. A storm is whipped up all around them. There is this mighty tornado. And from the tornado, God speaks. God says to Job, hey, listen, where were you when the world was formed? I didn't see you around when I was making everything. Were you around when I defeated the great sea monster Leviathan? By the way, how awesome is the Leviathan? This is a paraphrase, and it is actually talking about, like, God is talking about this sea monster, the sea dragon, how incredible it is, and how God ultimately ended up defeating it. I used to feel so uncomfortable with that, and today I love that. I love that so much. Where were you, Job, when I made the behemoth? Which is another monster that gets referenced from time to time, especially if you're like a Final Fantasy fan, right? Square Enix loves to trot out behemoth from time to time. We think, scholars think anyway, probably a hippo? Maybe. He's like, look how awesome hippos are, Job. And you know, truth be told, God's not wrong in this story. Hippos are pretty incredible creatures. God goes on to talk about like how incredible horses are. And I love this because you could tell our writer of this book is a horse boy, you know? He just loves his horses. He's like, look how fast they are. They're so pretty, you know? It's wonderful. Right, exactly. You know? And I just imagine that the book of Job was like delivered in like presentations. Maybe this was a theatrical performance. It's been theorized that's the case. I'm not sure. I don't really know. But I just love this idea of like this whole crowd of people who are like, yeah, now that you mention it, hippos and horses are like really fantastic. But God's point is like, if you don't understand how these animals work, and Job, you've already confessed in verses past, you don't even really understand how you work. Why do you think you understand how the universe works or how I work? You don't. Job responds that he is gobsmacked. He's finally encountered the God that he's worshipped, but just now is finally meeting. And before the book wraps up, God does speak to the friends. He gives them a verbal lashing. Y'all are talking about matters you're absolutely ignorant of. And restores Job's fortune. He gets twice as many kids, which Mimi's laughing. Mimi's like, listen, that is not, I mean, thank you, gods, and also that does not undo like the 10 kids who just died. One of the points we're supposed to take from this book is that we're often told how the world works, and the world doesn't always work that way. You know? And we want to embrace these easy answers because somehow they make our lives feel a bit more manageable. And the world is so complicated. Our lives are so complicated. As Job says, we're complicated. We're still getting to know who we are. And I think we need to be wary of those who tell us, like, they've got the whole universe figured out. They've got God all figured out. When we're the experts on who we are, and we're just scratching the surface, aren't we? So one of the things I hope we take away from this, and this whole series, is, you know, let's not rush to deliver these anesthetic answers to people in the hope that we can take their pain away and inadvertently give them more harm. Let us instead, I hope, become more comfortable sitting in discomfort with one another, and sharing space with each other. We don't have to answer for people why they're suffering. It's a gift when people get insights like that themselves. We don't have to rush to end their pain through our easy answers so quickly. That's my first hope. My second hope is that we can start understanding and appreciating that life is complicated and we don't always know why we're suffering. And we have this long list of other folks who have given us this baggage in Christian tradition and Christian society today and pop culture who want to tell us your life sucks because of you. And sometimes there's a part of us, or maybe all of us, who embrace, you know what? I am a screw up, and all of the troubles I have are my fault. Maybe some of them are. None of us are batting 1,000. But I don't think that when God sees you, God sees a screw up. I think God sees a beloved child that God wants better for. I just also think that God doesn't always get God's way, because the world is complicated. Things go wrong all the time. And sometimes we can point to why, and sometimes we can't. And the last thing that I hope for is that we can allow our circumstances, we can embrace complexity enough that we can allow God to break our boxes open. We don't have to have God all figured out. We don't have to have ourselves all figured out. We don't have to have our neighbors all figured out. We don't have to have the universe all figured out. In fact, the moment we think we do, the moment we box in people in the universe and God and ourselves, I actually think we're doing an injustice. I think we're constructing something that feels rather comforting in the moment, but can become a jail cell later. I know the alternative is having to look at this messy, messy life and say, I don't know. I don't know why I've got this health problem. Maybe there is no one to blame. And I don't know if there's a lesson necessarily that God's trying to teach me. And so God has caused this thing to happen. And maybe I don't have to label this neighbor who's dealing with a heartbreaking condition as somehow morally degenerate or deserving of it. I hope we can instead allow for the messiness in life and share space with one another and the divine. Now, I wanted to give more of a bow on this sermon because I still do love my boxes. And I want to tell you, I don't think God lets us down because I view God as ultimately faithful and trustworthy. But it comes back to what I said before, I think. Whenever we have expectations in our relationships, I think inevitably we will find them challenged. And then we have to deal with that. And that's not the end of things, though. I think that could be the beginning of beautiful things. An unboxed view of the world. A liberative view of God and one another and ourselves.